Pinocchio Part 3. Pinocchio Part 3. Focus question. How do Pinocchio's experiences change him? Pinocchio studied hard for a whole year. He did not quite enjoy it, but he earned the respect of all his classmates except Candlewick, the laziest, naughtiest boy in the school. Pinocchio took quite an interest in him. One day, the Blue Fairy told Pinocchio, "You have done well. Complete one more day of school, and you shall cease to be a wooden puppet." Pinocchio ran to tell Candlewick. Not finding him at home, Pinocchio looked and looked until at last he spotted the Versicle hiding on the porch of the peasant's cottage. To Pinocchio's surprise, Candlewick did not seem impressed to learn that Pinocchio would soon become a boy. Candlewick was more interested in his own plot to run away that very night to an island called the Land of Toys. "Come with me, Pinocchio," he begged. At first Pinocchio declined, saying, "No, never." Then Candlewick told him more about the place. "There are no schools," he said, "no masters, no books, no studies." Thinking of all the hard work he'd endured and the promise of more ahead, Pinocchio considered the offer. Just then they heard the sound of the distant trumpet. "Here it is!" Candlewick shouted. He pulled a very strange coach pulled by 12 pairs of donkeys. Candlewick leaped inside, holding the door open. He cried, "Come along! We shall have such fun!" Pinocchio sighed and finally jumped in. In the Land of Toys, all that anyone did was play and shout and ride bicycles. For 5 whole months, Pinocchio and Candlewick cavorted. Pinocchio hardly remembered his promise to the Blue Fairy, though he did think of his father's real sorrow from time to time. Then one morning he awoke and scratched his head and discovered that large ears had grown there. Pinocchio put on a big cotton cap and went outside to see Candlewick, who also wore a hat. "Excuse me," said Pinocchio, "will you let me see your ears?" "On a count of 3, let's remove our caps," Candlewick said. On the third count they did so, and saw that they suffered from the same condition. They began to point and laugh at each other until their laughter turned to loud brayings. Next they grew tails and hoofs, and began to walk on all fours. Just then, who should approach them but the coachman, who had taken them to the Land of Toys. He put the halters on the 2 donkeys and led them to market, where he sold them, each to a different master. Pinocchio was the ringmaster in a circus. He brought Pinocchio out into a ring full of onlookers and made him jump through a hoop. On the third leap, one of Pinocchio's hoofs caught, and he fell, injuring his leg. "I have no use for a lame donkey," the ringmaster muttered, hurrying him off stage. That night he threw Pinocchio into the sea. Pinocchio sank into the watery depths, for as a donkey he didn't know how to swim. He was at the point of drowning when, suddenly, a shoal of fish surrounded him and nibbled out the donkey flesh from his body. All that remained was the wooden puppet that had been trapped inside. Now Pinocchio floated straight to the top of the water, where he caught sight of a blue goat standing on the cliff above. It could be none other than his fairy, who'd sent the fish, just as she'd once summoned the woodpeckers to fix his nose. He had no time to rejoice, however, for a giant shape moved below him. It was, in fact, a hungry, beastly dogfish. The monster swallowed all the little fish and Pinocchio in one gulp. Pinocchio awoke to utter darkness. He listened, but he could hear no eye and no noise. Only From time to time, great gusts of wind blew in his face. Gradually, his eyes noticed a light shining dimly at a great distance. He dropped his way toward it until at last he reached the table set for dinner, lit by a single candle. At that table sat a little man whom Pinocchio was shocked to recognize. "Do my eyes tell me truth?" asked the little old man. "Are you really my dear Pinocchio?" Pinocchio wanted to laugh, wanted to cry, wanted to say 1,000 things, but he could only stammer a few broken words. At last he succeeded in uttering a cry of joy. "Oh, my dear papa, you're alive! I'll never leave you, never more!" Pinocchio and Geppetto flung their arms around one another. Then Geppetto recounted how, the same night the dogfish had swallowed his boat, it had also swallowed a large merchant vessel. For almost 2 years he'd been living off its stores, but now this candle was all he had left. "Then there is no time to lose," said Pinocchio. "He should run right out of the monster's mouth." "I cannot swim!" Geppetto exclaimed, but Pinocchio assured the old man that he would carry him. Pinocchio led Geppetto up the throat and down the tongue of the dogfish. As it happened, the sea monster slept with its mouth open. They could see the water and the moon outside between its teeth. Pinocchio put Geppetto on his back. They leaped from the dogfish's mouth, and Pinocchio swam all the way back to the mainland, dragging his papa to shore. Geppetto scarcely and had the breath to stand, but Pinocchio offered his arm, saying, "We will walk very slow, like the ants." They wandered for hours in search of shelter, until at last they arrived at a farmhouse. The farmer who lived there knew of them and welcomed them to stay, if they would earn their keep. From that day onward, Pinocchio rose early and worked as hard as he could. When he wasn't helping work the farm, he was looking after his father, whose health was not good. Soon Pinocchio heard noticed the effort. He began to make baskets every night after supper to sell. When he had saved 50 pennies, Pinocchio went to the marketplace to buy himself a coat. On the way, he met a big snail crawling out to meet him. "I am servant to the fairy with the blue hair," she said. "My lady has fallen ill, and she has not even enough to buy herself a mouthful of bread." Although a thought, Pinocchio gave the snail all his pennies to help the blue fairy. That night he made extra baskets to sell from her. When at last he collapsed into sleep, he dreamed of the fairy, who smiled and said, "Bravo, Pinocchio, your kind heart has prevailed. Your reward shall be a good and happy life." When Pinocchio awoke, it was back home in his own street bed. He hopped out and went and stood before the mirror. Looking back, he was not a puppet, but a boy. In the next room, he found his father, Master Geppetto the woodcarver, in excellent health. "Father, how can this be?" Pinocchio asked. "Then ill-behaved boys finally become good," Geppetto said. "They have the power to bring their families happiness. And where is the old Pinocchio?" Geppetto pointed to the wall, where a large wooden puppet hung limp. Pinocchio looked at it a short time before exclaiming, "Wow, ridiculous I was when I was a puppet! And now happy I am that I have become a real boy."